So here we are, at my very first Owl House theory, at least my very first proper one. I've snuck some small theory ideas into my various reviews of the show up to this point, here and there. And I want to preface this video by saying, I am far from the first person to come up with probably any of these ideas, frankly. So I know I'm in good company when it comes to a lot of these ideas, but I feel like it's still important to organize my specific thoughts on the matter all in one place. And what's great about this particular theory is that the recent Owl House episode, Echoes of the Past, it would have been last weekend's episode because this is going to be out sometime the following week. Not sure when yet, but sometime, I'm sure. That episode, the first backstory episode we've gotten for the character of King, doesn't necessarily confirm any of the ideas that I'm going to put forth here, but it definitely makes them way more likely, and it doesn't disprove any of them at all. And for simplicity's sake, I'm going to be splitting this theory up into two parts. The first is going to lead up to the second. The second is not going to take too much time in the video, but I feel if I state the thesis of part two right now, it's just going to distract from the rest of the video. So starting off, the main idea that I want to put forth with the main part of this video is that King is right. He is, in fact, the king of demons. And I think in this context, and feel free to disagree with me, this is definitely something that is not confirmed by the show yet, and is barely even implied. I think King of Demons, at least back in the day before Belos and his regime was a thing, meant the king of the Boiling Isles. Because after all, the Boiling Isles exist in the demon realm, and that seems to be the place where demons live. Like, witches live there too, and witches seem to be a distinct species from demons, with the different kinds of demons being more akin to, like, breeds of dogs, maybe, or something. But that doesn't change the fact that the Boiling Isles seems to be demon country, as much as it is witch country, if not even more. And I say, if not more, because of the name of the dimension, right? Demon realm. It's in the name. And maybe witches fell under that umbrella too, and maybe they didn't. I don't know. We do know that before Belos came along, there were wild witches. Maybe that was only some witches. Maybe it was all of them. Maybe it didn't matter. Maybe the demons united under the Demon King, the peoples united under the Demon King, witches or demon, were kind of chaotic. The time before Belos came, and this was from a book that called Belos' reign cruel, the implication being that this is supposed to be a more accurate version of their history than what Belos would tell you himself, were said to be savage. And like, yeah, that does come across as a propaganda line. Like something that Belos would say to make his reign seem more legitimate. I ended this savage age, right? He is very much coded as a colonizer, if not literally a colonizer. But again, that's something we'll talk about in the next theory. But again, the fact that that specific term was included in a book that seemed to be more objective, I think it holds a little bit more weight than just being propaganda, right? And in the episode Echoes of the Past, we actually see evidence that this might be the case too. The tower that King takes them to in that episode, the tower where he was born and then found later by Ida, has reliefs all over the walls which depict a being that now seems to be King's father, doing all sorts of, like, violent conquest-y kinds of things. Like, maybe he's fighting, like, defensive wars. But considering King's attitude, how savage he can be, I'm thinking probably not. I'm thinking dude might have been the aggressor. And this is the guy who I think was the former king of demons. I think he's the guy that Belos usurped in order to take the throne. And for a while, I thought that King might literally be this guy, because he seems to think that he is. Anyway, the episode even plays with that idea for a while, with King going so far as to say that he was that guy, but then got shrunk down by something that happened to him. Something which apparently coincides with that father creature roaring, something which in his language means son, something which King heard inside his egg, and yet still knew what it meant already, even when he was an unborn creature. Like, you could argue that it was literally just his dad checking on the egg and roaring son at him, looking forward to having a son, kind of doing the whole talking to the baby in the womb thing. But King flat out says that he heard the roar and wanted to help, but he couldn't yet, so he went back to sleep.
I remember a deep roar, and then something happened. But I was too small to do anything, so I went back to sleep.
Which makes it sound like this being, whoever it was in danger. So maybe it wasn't that King was affected by a spell. Maybe this other creature was, and even unborn, King recognized subconsciously what had happened and just applied it to himself. Because I think the fact that he knew that that roar meant son tells us that whatever King is, whatever specific kind of demon King is, has some kind of genetic memory. That they know things that past generations knew from birth. Maybe they have to kind of relearn them in order to jog their memory. Maybe that's even why King seems so interested in history and demon biology. He's trying to scratch that itch himself, but just doesn't know specifically how to yet. And so he's just apt to get himself confused with this past ruler, his father. Because in a way, he kind of is his father. In terms of what he knows, anyway. And before anybody says anything, this isn't the only piece of evidence I have for this genetic memory thing. There's also the thing with his horn and how reattaching it seems to restore some of his lost memories. Yeah, that doesn't prove genetic memory, but it does prove that there's something weird about how his memory works relative to other beings. And basically, I think that there's some limited continuity of identity going from his father to him. Sort of like a biological divine right kind of thing. Oh, hey, this baby was born knowing basically everything the past king did. It makes sense that he should be the king. Let's establish a divine right of birth monarchy, right? And if that's the case, if this genetic memory thing exists, that also explains why King is not only interested in demons, because obviously the king of demons would have been interested in demons, but why he seems so vicious sometimes. If this guy really wasn't a great guy, this former king of demons really wasn't a super great guy, it makes sense that King, subconsciously emulating a lot of his behaviors, filtered through the mind of a child who's just trying to play games most of the time, might behave like King behaves, right? And that's not to say that I necessarily think that, I'm just going to call him King's dad. That's not necessarily to say that I think that King's dad was like wholly a bad guy either. Just that he was kind of vicious and violent. Like a fantasy Klingon, for lack of a better term. The vicious, violent warrior culture type. Yeah, that's right. There's actually a word for that, and it's an orc. Maybe he was basically an orc. And that's why such a big part of King's arc so far has been him learning to be better from Ida to a limited capacity, and more specifically from Luce, because one day he is going to take the throne again, but he's going to take the throne as a better ruler than his father was. This genetic memory thing would also explain King's propensity, back when he was living in that tower before Ida found him, to stack rocks in the shape of these weird rock and flesh golem creatures that seem like they were put there specifically to guard the tower, and more specifically King himself, though I think it may be that it wasn't necessarily King that they were guarding, but anyone who was part of the royal family, and he's just like the last one left, right? We know for a fact that demons do have magic in this world, and not just the more humanoid-esque demons that like go to school with witch kids and stuff, who seem to either be closer to witches physiologically or else like mixed demon and witch, right? Demons in this world seem to have magic to varying degrees. And I think specifically demons of King's lineage have really strong magic based on who specifically I think they are, which is that second thesis, and we'll get to that in a second. In short, I think it was King's own family, his own father, more specifically, because I don't necessarily think he had a mother. I think his race might reproduce asexually, right? It would kind of make sense with the whole genetic memory thing, right? And anyway, after that brief aside, I think it was King's family specifically who made those flesh and stone golem things with some of the power that, as the rulers of this world, they specifically are privy to. And that he was remembering that and trying to do that. He was subconsciously compelled to do that because he recognized that he was still in danger and was trying to protect himself. Because it seems like only one of those creatures, which he takes home at the end of Echoes of the Past and names John Luke, and it's so cute. Not the creature. King. King is so cute. The creature is disgusting. Only one of them, though, seems to still be operational, and it seems like it exists in a resting state unless King is actively in danger. And man, is it so interesting to me, the aesthetic that they gave to this creature. Because its weird animated flesh magic reminds me of exactly two things. One, the weird fleshiness of the Isles themselves. Like everything on the Isles seems to be kind of fleshy in one way or another. The trees and their leaves don't have normal tree and leaf color palettes. Like they feel kind of off. Like even for like a fall palette, which seems to be what they're closest to. Like the trees have eyes, for example, and we have seen plants that are grown by characters like Willow that have like eyes and mouths and things. The color palette of the trees in this world feel kind of flesh and bloody. And we know that apples in this world don't have juice. They have blood instead. All of the plants in this world seem to be some sort of flesh and plant hybrid, as if the life that created them came literally from the Titan, from his flesh and blood, and evolved from it if they weren't like specifically created from it by some sort of magical power. And likewise, I think all of the people on the islands were created from the Titan as well. It's said that the Titan gave its life to give life to the Isles, and I think that's meant literally. And the idea that the Titan might have flesh magic, the ability to create life from flesh, is mirrored in the being which I don't literally think he can talk to the Titan, but I think he's tuned into its power. And that being Bellows. We see him use flesh magic against Luce in the season 1 finale. In fact, it's been suggested that when Bellows first shows up to the point where he tries to actually directly interact with Luce to take what he wants from her, that Bellows was a flesh golem that Bellows created as a decoy, and that's why he was so confident that he couldn't be harmed. And also why he was able to move around in such weird, awkward ways and kind of seem to disappear and reappear. But even if that's not the case, even if that was really him the whole time, that does mean he's able to like manipulate his own flesh and like merge it with the fleshy ground of the Isles and stuff, right? And I think that power comes directly from his link to the Titan. And I'm sure you can tell where I'm going with this. I think that means that if King's family has the ability to create fleshy golems to use similar flesh magic, that means that they originally had a similar connection with the Titan. Maybe even the true version of the connection that Bellows has sort of made for himself now and pretends to have been granted by the Titan itself. Now, in fact, if you look at the Titan, even though it seems a little more humanoid than King does, or even the creature from those reliefs that I think was his father does, it looks very similar to him, doesn't it? Like, it has the two horns, it has the sharp, toothy jaw, and there was a recent poster for Season 2 that showed King and the Titan both with a greater level of detail than we usually see on them. And King and the Titan both had similar pockmarks in their weird cubone head skull things that usually aren't detailed and yet seem to be drawn to specifically parallel each other, as if to create a connection between these two characters. Like, I think at this point we can safely say, especially considering that Bellows literally takes King's place in the new opening sequence of the show, that Bellows did, in one way or another, usurp the throne from King and or his family. I think that's something that we are supposed to, at this point, assume. But I think specifically that King and his family are the closest, most direct descendants of the Titan himself. That King is more or less literally the Titan. I know that sounds crazy, and I don't have any more evidence of that than what I've already put forth here. I just really feel like this is something. I can't entirely put my finger on why, but I feel like it's something. And the weird fleshy magic employed in that tower specifically for King's benefit, as well as those weird pockmarks that King and the Titan shared in that poster, I feel like these are details put there to push this idea. And, like, obviously I'm not literally saying that, like, King and the Titan are the same being, but, like, if there is some sort of genetic memory, if his specific breed of demon does have some sort of genetic memory, and they do trace more directly back to the Titan than anyone else, wouldn't it make sense that maybe they might have some natural idea of what the Titan's will is built into them, the thing that Bellows pretends to have now? I think it makes sense. I think that while Luce is definitely the protagonist of this show, King is going to end up being the hero of the show overall. That he is going to end up being the one who, once Bellows is defeated and removed from his position of power, is going to have to step up, either to take power for himself as the good person he learned to be because of his time with Luce, or to give up that power and give it back to the people. But even if this is all true, it doesn't explain where Bellows came from or how he was able to do the many things that he was able to do. And I feel like understanding that is going to be a major component in understanding whether or not all this stuff about King is correct or not. So, as I mentioned previously, my next theory is going to be an attempt to piece together something resembling an origin and a backstory for Bellows. It's not going to be very accurate. I know that already. It's going to be mostly speculation. But I still feel like it's worth putting these ideas out there. That's coming sometime in the next couple of weeks, hopefully. I really hope it doesn't end up being delayed, because that would really suck. I've said it now in 2 different videos that I hope to have it out within the next 2 weeks. But that's all beside the point for now. Anyway, as per usual, I'd like to know, what do you guys think of any of the ideas that I put forth in this theory? And man, it feels good to say that about something that isn't just like long shot speculation about old Steven Universe stuff. It feels so good to say it about something new and topical. So let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below. Let's engage with this video and get it out there so that people can see it and start watching my channel again. Please. And while you're down there, you might as well like the video and share it with anyone else who you think would enjoy my content. Subscribe if you haven't. You can also check out the links to my various social medias, as well as the many ways that you can help out the channel. Those will be in the video description. But either way, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.